all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Feature Podcast, where every week we look for the perfect pairing of two films, and sometimes we get lucky. I'm your host, Dean, joined by the co-host, the one who actually runs the scenes over here, David. David, how are you?
Oh, I'm flattered, Dean. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, we're finally out of 2020,
Yeah,
officially.
it's crazy how things just magically end once 2020 ended.
Yeah, the sun came out, the birds are chirping, everything's just dandy right now. And we're going
Yeah,
to start off the year right. As we've may have mentioned earlier, we're going to be a little bit more focused, going to be a little bit better, and we're going to start off with some good movies this year.
yeah, certainly some good movies. These were a treat for me while I was out sick over the late holidays this past week. But I'm glad we got to start off the new year right because this pairing of Coen Brother movies really is going to be an inspiration to a lot of people, I think.
Oh, yeah. This week we're going to be watching Blood, Simple, and Raising Arizona, the first two films from the Coen brothers, and
Yes.
also the most drastically different films you could watch from the same director.
Yeah. Apparently they did these movies Blood Simple first as like a low budget feature uh premiere debut, that's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
um they just did this apparently with the help of Sam Raimi, so I'll issue an early apology that apparently Sam Raimi did do good things for cinema.
Sam Raimi did amazing things for cinema, sir. You just don't like Darkman.
Yeah, but either way, um Raising Arizona, on contrast, was apparently done because they wanted to show people that they could be these very calculated thriller directors, but also showing people that they had comedy chops, which obviously reverberates throughout the rest of their career. I mean, they always go between these kind of crime thrillers and slapstick kind of comedies that are also kind of smart.
It's really interesting because they have a lot of range as directors. I know
Yeah,
there's some directors who we think of as, great directors. Alfred Hitchcock is one of them, but he really only worked in one, two genres his career, and those were like thrillers, mysteries, things like that.
yeah.
Um, I know there's Tarantino. He usually only does like crime films. He's done a couple of westerns, but they're crime films just in a western guise.
And particularly because genre tone is also a part of genre. Tarantino, for as an example, he doesn't really stray away from a particular tone. I mean, with the exception of maybe, oh, I don't know, Reservoir Dogs really has a slightly different tone from the rest of the movies. It's a little bit more time based and thrillerish because of the particular high concept of that movie.
Hmm.
Tarantino doesn't often have like a bunch of high concept things. They're mostly these very specific stories that he plucks out of his mind.
There's
I mean, if
also.
to the extreme to that, there's Pulp Fiction, which is the furthest thing from high concept. Um,
Are you sure?
yeah,
Pulp Fiction's pretty high concept.
how?
It,
I
I
mean,
I mean, I guess it comes down to how it's narratively told in non-sequential order, but
yeah, but even then, there's not like a specific main character and a specific goal throughout the movie. It's pretty meandering. Like,
it's like it. Okay, Pulp Fiction is like five short films and short like 20-minute films jammed together in the same shared universe. That's a high concept like pitch.
no, I don't think so.
I
High concept is like Iron Man. A man in a metal suit goes to fight,
in
terrorism across the
Reservoir
world.
Dogs is high concept. A bunch of thieves wait for their contact to come and bail him out of a botched robbery.
Yeah, because that's like the high concept can be said in one sentence. That's the point of a high concept movie.
I guess. All right, I guess. But I guess back to the point that the Coen brothers, they're pretty big on just high concept genre kind of bits that do play with cinematic comedy with really weird crime stuff, and these two movies are kind of the these two movies will show people the extreme ends of the Coen brothers like
Yeah,
filmography.
certainly. Well, without further ado, I guess we should break into those log lines.
Yeah, what are these movies about? What are these elevator pitches?
Blood Simple is about a bar owner's wife who is caught between a love triangle with a handsome bartender and her husband, all tracked by a hitman hired to kill. Raising Arizona is about a wily corner store thief and a heartbroken desk cop as they steal one baby from the quintuplets of Arizona's finest furniture store mogul.
It's good.
Yeah.
So yeah, those two things sound drastically different. And I kind of am unsure where we want to start. Do we want to just start with their first film or the one that's probably made them famous?
Yeah, I think we could go in order because, in line with our working theory, I do think the sequencing of Blood Simple, then Raising Arizona worked for me this time around. I think if we were to do the other way around, Blood Simple would be kind of like a just like way too quiet of an ending after going through the explosion packed, wily adventure that Raising Arizona is.
Yeah, like I can agree with that. I watched these in that order: Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, and that's the best order to watch them in. And on that note, Blood Simple, ladies and gentlemen. David, what's the first thing that jumped out at you with this movie?
Very quiet and very not Coen-esque is the first thing I thought about. Is it didn't feel like a Coen Brothers movie most of the runtime, and that could also be because this was their style nowadays is marked by a very high level of like cinematic immersion.
Mm-hmm.
You could, when you look at that screen, you could tell it's their movie, and especially when you hear the movie. Um, and I watched plenty of interviews on this being one of my picks for Directors Month. This is one I have heavily researched. They have acknowledged that this is before a lot of their style was discovered. They were still kind of like figuring it out. So there were certain things that they acknowledged about this, i.e., one of the things we pointed out, being an alliance with Sam Raimi, um, who I guess I can't remember which one the older of the two is. I think it's Ethan Cohen, if I'm correct. Whichever
Maybe.
one, whichever one has the long hair.
Yeah,
um,
the long-haired one.
yeah, he was apparently a production assistant on one of the Evil Dead movies or
I
something
think
like
they
this.
together did the editing on Evil Dead, the first one.
Yeah, I think that's what it was, and they had gone on to work with him for Crime Wave as well, which was an actual Sam Raimi movie that they wrote. And Blood Simple was their first directorial debut. They wrote it themselves, and Raimi had helped them out by kind of helping them tweak some of the camera techniques. One of them being the steady camera shots that they used in this, and that was you don't see steady camera in a modern Cohen film. They're the camera, because this was all before Roger Deakins as well, so there's
Yeah,
that.
Roger Deakins, I think, had already started working, but this was before Roger Deakins was Roger Deakins.
Right, and I think Roger Deakins also tends to, with the Coens, use a much more static camera.
Hmm.
It's not always static. There's camera movement, but it's a lot more subdued. And
He
they
also
acknowledge,
eliminates the super wide angles that are used in this movie. That
yeah, the angles aren't as wide as I thought they would be. Whereas, the Coens are never going as far as fisheye or anything.
mhm.
They've been known to be very fond of their 15 to 35s. Um, and I guess aside from that, is it just kind of felt like a movie at first. Um, it really just kind of felt like I was watching something that would come up on TV. The setup is a little slow, but you could feel there's something there because the characters are so tight knit, so it was pretty easy to follow.
It's
I
really
enjoyed that.
interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting that this is their first directorial debut, and all the actors are on point.
Yeah,
I don't know if people think of the Coen brothers as actor directors, but they can really get a lot out of the actors in this movie. I don't know how many of them were professional actors. I know at least two or three of them were already professional actors that have been in stuff, but I don't know how much of the rest of them were. They probably all were, but they really get a lot out of them.
yeah, and they're not at least Francis McDormand's really the name that goes on to be recognizable after this movie.
Well,
Uh,
there's the hitman, Walsh. Is that his name?
yeah,
Granted, he's famous because he hooked onto the Coen brothers, and then he was in a bunch of their movies up until he passed. Or did he pass? I don't know if is he still alive?
he's pretty old at the time, so he might. M. Emmett Walsh, I believe, is the man you're referencing, who played the detective.
Yeah,
Um, let's see, and then I really like this Dan Hedaya, who played Julian, um, the bar owner.
yeah.
Really pegged me as a kind of guy like, yeah, man, he could be casted as Richard Nixon. I would have believed that that's Richard Nixon.
Dude, no meme. I was watching the movie the other night, and I'm looking at it, and I swear to God, I thought that guy had to have been in a Richard Nixon biopic at some point in his career,
Yeah,
because he has the same hairline, he has the same like jowls, facial structure. He just looks like Richard Nixon. Like
yeah,
he could have been like a body double or something.
yeah. It's kind of interesting. Like the only other things I the other stuff he's been in apparently is like The Usual Suspects, but I don't. I think I've only seen that movie once. I don't really remember.
Really?
Um,
Usual Suspects is actually good.
yeah,
Would
it
highly
certainly is. And
recommend The
then
Usual Suspects.
Clueless, I guess, is the only other thing that he's in.
That's weird. Well,
Yeah, that's
that is what it is.
big names, but
Yeah.
um,
Other than that, so yeah, Blood Simple, ladies and gentlemen. This is a. How would you describe this movie? Because I watched some stuff about this. I did a little research, and people were saying this was a crime exploitation kind of film, and I didn't really get that too much. I felt this was a heavy noir film. Granted, it's a
yeah,
1980s noir film, so it's a postmodern noir film, but you know what I mean.
I didn't get a whole lot of exploitation either. It's obviously like crime because it has to do with, well, crime. Um, it's probably a much more quiet crime story than what most would probably consider in the genre,
Hmm.
which is also, I think, where you might be right in considering there's a lot of noir in this. It's not quite classic noir because it's not a detective story, but I do think there's elements of kind of a noir tragedy going on here. Maybe all of something like Double Indemnity is a little bit less detective-y and more about like a lover's quarrel, um, which I do believe that they reference that a couple times in inspiration throughout their career. So I would imagine that this could be one of those an inspiration for that.
Yeah, I saw something about this, and they referenced Double Indemnity, Kiss Me Deadly, the old Philip Marlowe detective stories
Yeah,
that this was really inspired by, which I guess if you were gonna make your first feature film and you didn't have too much money, because I think they only had like 500 grand for this picture. I think that was the budget,
Huh.
and which, a lot of money for your first feature, but they sourced it through everything and whatnot. But if they were gonna do a first feature, noir is a really good place to start because you can kind of lean into a lot of genre stuff and get away with it as long as the story's like pretty good. People will watch it, and that's kind of what this is. It's a really interesting story, and the
Yeah,
acting's really good. There's really interesting camera work going on. Um, there's one shot where I think he's shooting through the wall, and the light rays of light are going through, and there's that smoke going on. Like, there's some really cool shots in this movie. But yeah.
yeah, and the other thing I think too is like the shots that are cool never are just for the sake of being cool, because that's one thing I think a lot of indie filmmakers make a mistake of. They end up doing things more to like try and raise their cinematic value when all it is just a bunch of random crap. Um,
Yeah. I mean, we've come across that when we've done our too obscure episodes. Because for those who don't know, our too obscure for TV podcast is we look at really, really low budget or independent films that are really hard to find. And we've
yeah,
come across that before where this image isn't really serving a point. It just looks cool.
yeah,
I think you mentioned that in one of our soon to be episodes, Chlorine, where the guy's in the bathroom and there's all the mirror shots going on, and it's
right,
that's a cool image, but it doesn't do anything.
yeah. And I think it's like the specific technical problem is that people often try to think of the shot before they think about the story.
Mm,
When in all reality, it's like, okay, you go into the scene, and specifically with this climax scene between McDormand and the detective, you want to really showcase like the claustrophobia in the room. You want to really showcase how vulnerable she is and how,
dangerous he is.
yeah, kind of like how much of a tornado he seems to be in these people's lives. And what better way to do that to first contrast the light? I mean, that's something you could really do. Deakins especially has always been somebody to really talk about the importance of finding meaning in your light before finding good lighting.
Hmm.
And the really harsh light of that bathroom versus the pitch black of the room, um, I think really kind of does something poetic for the scene, because then the bullet holes with the light peeking through, yeah, it's like an ominous little like, oh, it looks like he's about to bust through this wall kind of shot and kill me.
Go old Kool-Aid man on your ass.
Yeah, but if you think about it, there's almost something poetic in that the detective was sent to shed light on this really taboo relationship, and now that the Pied Piper is coming, and they're gonna have to pay for the eventuality of that.
Hmm.
Um,
There's also, okay, I can't remember if this was mentioned in the story, but this happened and it confused the hell out of me. So the detective, he's hired to go and kill McDormand and the bartender, right? That she's having the affair with.
yeah.
And he goes in, he takes a picture of them, and then he doctors the photo of them being murdered. And then he goes and gives it to the husband. So, spoiler warnings for all those involved. I assume this
Of
movie's like
course, it's kind
30
of,
something years old.
yeah,
Yeah. So he gives him the photo, and it's a doctored photo that shows them dead, but they're not really dead. And then he gets the money, but he still then kills the guy who hired him. Why does he kill the guy who hired him
Uh,
if he
so that's
didn't?
actually the thing I thought was the most Cohen about this movie, is
Mm,
that I feel like oftentimes their characters could do what they're supposed to, but they don't because of greed, or other selfish motivations, which I just think they use as like a blanket rule. Always make your characters selfish. I recently was watching the first season of the television series Fargo.
mm,
Um, and the movie itself, is about a man who's doing something extremely selfish so that he can just get a leg up on the old man, you know?
Yeah.
But the character in the television show, especially, is an interesting kind of Breaking Bad story from like a guy who's totally selfless and like kind of mouseish and turns into this fucking asshole. Played by, oh, what's his name?
Martin Freeman?
Yeah, Martin Freeman. I think we
Man, I'm good.
had the same exact problem on the podcast once before, so I apologize. But um, Martin Freeman, great job. But there's this scene where he has everything he could possibly need, right?
Mm.
He's gotten away with murder, technically. He's, you know, set up with a great wife again, great home, great career, and yet he sees the antagonist, and he could let it go. He could just let their paths cross very closely and then never see each other again. But he decides to confront him as like you don't even really realize why in the moment, and it's kind of a anything other than he's just trying to like show his dick at this point. And
He's just trying to lay it out on the table, being like, I'm the man here. Like
yeah,
I'm the winner of this interaction.
exactly. And I think that they do that partially because if you're thinking about writing that story point, and it's not that this isn't written by them, but I'm sure the writer took to account this rule they use. If you're going to conjure up random story beats that in any other story might just be plot twists, you need to have character motivation behind it. Obviously, that's what everybody's always missing when they say that's a bad plot twist. So, what better character motivation you can put behind these things than just saying people are greedy, people suck. This is how things get messy, and this is the rule they use throughout their career. Because think about all the great movies that they use this in. I mean, No Country for Old Men, Fargo, The Big Lebowski has this. You know, all of those revolve in some way around one character messing things up because of greed.
I can kind of see where you're coming from that. It's just in this particular instance, I think it's a weird logical flaw in the movie. It doesn't make the movie bad by any stretch of the imagination. The movie's very good. It's just the detective kills the guy who hired him, but he just doesn't do the I guess he doesn't do the job because the people he's hired to kill aren't actually guilty of anything. And he kills the other guy because, he's greedy and the other guy's actually a bad guy. And then he only goes back to kill everybody else because they're now complicit in a crime. And it's almost like the detective is like an angel of vengeance or an angel of justice upon them. And the only reason he doesn't kill McDermott is because she's just unaware of the goings on around them. Because the bartender, like the guy she's having the affair with, he buries the bar owner alive. That he
Yeah,
commits a sin of murder. And it's really interesting there, but I
yeah.
might be reading too much into this.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think I still read the detective as greedy because I think there's a little bit of money motivation out of this too. Because he ransacks the safe and everything, or he tries to. Um, and I think that at the end of it, it's just that the detective's corruption ends up being the reason he goes back to kill the bartender.
Mm-hmm.
Because now I think there's that interesting second half point, right, where after the body is buried alive.
Which is horrifying to watch.
Oh yeah, and
It
that
is
was one of the
real
moments
hard.
where I saw definitely the horror influences from Sam Raimi, and otherwise they said they had a lot of influence from low budget horror, but
Yeah.
yeah, that was definitely a terrifying scene, especially because they reused the exact same moment from the beginning of Fargo in this. When the semi truck coming in, you just see the light on the dark
Oh
highway.
yeah.
Same exact
Also,
moment from Fargo.
that's actually a really interesting point because I've seen people say that the Coens they hadn't found their director stylistics yet in Blood Simple,
Yeah.
but they definitely found out what works from Blood Simple, and you see a lot of points in the movie repeated throughout their work, and that's one of them. You know, you see the in the dark highway in the distance, a truck coming. They have to hide a body or hide something before the truck gets there, and reveals the whole scheme that builds suspense. The guy constantly glancing back into the back of the car, and it's the same shot, reverse shot. It's the same angle, even that's been repeated in a couple of their other movies.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. This movie very much is a interesting seed as to a bunch of stuff we see later in their career.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, like, I think this is an interesting case study in like good directors know what they want from the get go. It's just that they don't know how to do it yet. So they're discovering, and as a result of that discovery, you try certain things like maybe the steady cam on the lawn, like when the bar
The
owner,
Where they steal the Sam Raimi demon shot from
which
Evil
is
Dead.
apparently Sam Raimi taught them how to build. He built the rig for them, like the Steadicam rig, which is really nothing more than they take a piece of plywood, screw the camera to the plywood, like facing outward, and then just put two handles on either side, and have two guys run up to exactly where they need to do it, do the shot. So they use that shot or that method twice in this movie, once on this lawn, and then once in the bar when like the camera goes over the guy passed out on the bar.
Which is actually kind of funny to me, where that's one of their bit of camera technique comedy moments
Yeah,
where, oh, we're coming up in this guy and he's gonna block the thing, and they just kind of hop over him and just keep going. And it's really weird because usually you're not supposed to be aware of the camera when you're watching a movie, and the Coen brothers seem to be like, no, you should be aware that the camera's there, it's a movie. You should be
yeah,
aware that the camera is there and we're manipulating things. It also makes what's in the frame more important. It's
certainly.
really interesting.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny too because that bar shot, well, it's not quite as borrowed as like the Fargo reference we just made. Kind of reminds me a lot of like the dollies through the bowling alley in The Big Lebowski. Uh,
Well, they use the same dolly shot in the bowling alley that they do when he's walking out into like the dirt field to bury him,
mm,
because it's the same tracking.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Granted, it's also just a very common camera technique. It's interesting. This movie is very interesting.
Yeah, because the one thing ultimately that I really enjoy about the Coens is that everything they do is simple. There's nothing overcomplicated. There's nothing that you can't figure out just by watching the movie once, maybe twice. Eventually, all the bones are there. Like they show them, they show their whole hand once you've seen the whole movie. It's just that by just sticking to the basics, you could still get something really great out of film instead of having to go so overcomplicated like some directors seem to think they have to just to impress an audience.
The Christopher Nolan method.
Yeah, as everybody is apparently complaining about with Tenet and its problems of being, we talk about high concept, too high of a concept where it's just like, okay, there's nothing else here except for the concept itself.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting when you compare the Coens to other modern directors, because they're modern directors. They
Yeah.
still make movies today. They're still very highly regarded in cinema today. People
Yeah, I
go out
think
and see Coen Brothers films.
I think actually they're working on something right now, but it's apparently just gonna have, I think just Joel or just Ethan is gonna be on the project. Um, yeah, so it's not like a Coen Brothers film, but the
It's
last
a
thing before
Coen
that was
film.
Buster Scruggs,
Yeah. Well,
which was
didn't
interesting.
that one get nominated for like a bunch of Oscars?
I wasn't aware. I actually watched it quite a bit after it came out, but it's an
Hmm.
interesting little anthology. It really is.
Yeah. But it's interesting because almost all of their movies, The Big Lebowski, Raising Arizona, that we're going to talk about soon, no, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, No Country for Old Men, they're all very, very simple to understand stories. Oh Brother Where Art Thou, for instance, is basically just the Odyssey in the Depression era South. That's basically the movie. uh, Big Lebowski is, what if this like kind of deadbeat dude is in a crime thriller or in like a noir thriller, and that's like the
Yeah,
movie. And they all go through the really basic plot beats that they're supposed to, but it has this very interesting flair, and also the characters. The Coens are really good at writing characters because all the
absolutely.
characters
Yeah.
are interesting.
Yeah, and actually, I think that you kind of pointed out the two things that are missing in this movie that then, when we talk about Raising Arizona, will actually come into the forefront. Um, First, that a lot of Coen brother movies tend to have like this really personal touch to the details of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Fargo, especially, which is about their technically where they grew up, or A Serious Man is also about that. But a lot of stories that they end up choosing are for personal reasons. I believe Big Lebowski was actually done as a parody of a college professor they had who was a part of like the whole the Vietnam protest generation, and he would show up to
Oh,
class
okay.
like raggedy as hell, like the dude, and drank Russians apparently as well. Um, but they just decided to take that character, like you said, and put it into a fucking noir film, and bang, boom, boom, it writes itself. You know, and it doesn't write itself because like Big Lebowski is a very specific movie. Uh,
I've heard people argue that The Big Lebowski is the greatest film of all time. I've heard people make serious arguments about that before.
I'd put it up as one of the greatest comedies of all time, certainly. Um, Greatest film, you know, that's
That
could
gets
be
into a
up for
whole other
debate.
thing. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's the greatest film of all time. It's really good. Like, The Big Lebowski might be the Coen brothers' best movie. I mean, there's probably like three or four you could say are their best work. You know,
Yeah,
it depends on the day.
yeah, because like, which one won them the Palme d'Or? Which one won them the Oscar? Which one is like the cult classic? You know, it's like they
Which is
kind
the
of
one
have a
the
hand in each
people love, which is
basket.
the one the critics love, which is the one the studios love, and all that.
Yeah, and but you know, so there's the personal touch, but yeah, then the other thing is the characters. The characters in this movie, to me, are not that well defined. The detective character is the one who has the most like um, nuance to him, like or a detail that a Coen Brothers character would. Um,
There's the most. He has the most crunch in his character,
yeah, because he's got that laugh. He's got the rolled up cigarettes. He's kind of a odd looking Texas fella. Um,
and that just goes into Walsh's performance because he's very good in this movie.
yeah, and and I think that he stands out the most at the end of the day because he of all the three, because like when you think about the other three characters, okay, Frances McDormand, beautiful in this movie, don't get me wrong, is kind of still just a damsel in distress until the end where she is quite formidable. um the
Yeah, but
bartender kind of falls flat still at the end of the day for me. um I was he kind of is like a blandish character aside
it
from being
think
involved.
I think it's one of those things where the McDermott or McDormand and the bartender and the bar owner, they're they are characters for the movie to work, right? The bar owner is meant to be this like seedy kind of a bastard who's out to get these two because they're fooling around behind his back. He is designed to be the bad guy until the end of Act 1 when he dies. He's just meant to be just like the slimy asshole.
Yeah,
The bartender, he's meant to be run of the mill Texas bartender guy who gets in way over his head. And McDermott is, yeah, damsel in distress, but she's just like, she's acting a character who is completely unaware of what's going on. And she now has to deal with the fallout of the two men in her life.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. I'm going between this movie is great to this movie is weird, but I'm not saying that none of this movie is bad.
No,
Let's do
I
that.
still think it's a good movie. I mean, because at the end of the day, just having the four characters to follow is actually even better to, you know, it makes the story better just being that simple, that blood simple. Some might say.
It is
Um,
blood simple. I wonder if that's where they got the name.
I kind of really wish that the black bartender would have been more part of the movie because he was really enjoyable. I thought. But you know,
Hmm.
the only other thing I think I want to talk about with this is, as a final note, is what'd you think of that final shot of Under the Sink?
Oh God, where he's seeing that last drop of water break, and then it like cuts to black. That one.
But the water, like the shot, they like forward and reverse it a couple times. Did you notice that?
Did they?
Yeah. So like in the final shot under the sink, you know, it's the POV of him staring up at the very moist sink, by the way, which is like that. I don't think a sink would just be that moist out of nowhere, but um, it's still, you know, obviously is one of those things where it's just like it's an interesting little, like it reminded me of Chinese water torture. Um, and like if you notice that, like for they do it kind of really quickly, but it's three or four times, like the drop, like drops, recedes, drop, proceeds, drop, proceeds, and then drops, and then it cuts to black. And I was like, why would you? I don't get that. Like, why would you do that?
It has to be one of those like symbolic art house touches kind of thing,
Hmm.
which is weird because the Coen brothers are not art house artsy directors by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Um, but it I always took it as so it drops once, it drops twice, and it drops a third time, and then it finally falls. That's
No.
the life of the bartender, the bar owner, and the detective all falling, and then it finally breaks, and that's the end of the movie. And that's the
Okay.
movie ending. That's how I would take it.
Could be. Could be.
It's those three people tried to get away and they died, and the one that falls is McDermott, who actually got away and survived this whole ordeal. Granted, I could be full of shit,
Well, maybe
but
it is
that's
supposed
how
to
I
be.
would probably take it.
Yeah, maybe it is just supposed to be that like interpretive kind of thing. That's how a lot of directors end up using their final shot as interpretation.
But yeah,
Yeah.
but that was blood simple.
Very enjoyable. Glad we
Yeah,
watched it.
very enjoyable, super fun watch. Um, really simple story, simple premise, very simple, or not even simple, just very down to the bones, basic work that just hits it out of the park. You don't need to be
Yeah.
super high concept to make a career. Sometimes if you know your technique, you do the basics and it just works, you get a career. And speaking of
Yeah.
getting a career, what do the Coen brothers make after this? Raising
Raising
Arizona.
Arizona.
Yep. And we're going to be talking about that right now.
Dean, I found a great way for us to do something cool and to make a little money on the side.
Ah, great. I've been looking for a new place to put my money. What do you got?
No investment needed. In fact, it's super easy, and there's creation tools we can use to record our podcast right from the phone or computer.
Wait, why would you record a podcast on your phone? You want? Never mind. Where do I put my money for this?
I don't need any of your money. We can even get our podcast distributed to big streaming platforms like Spotify and Google Podcasts.
Oh, I get it now. We're talking big business here. Okay, so you're gonna need a lot of money from me. How much money are we talking here?
No, definitely don't need any of your money. In fact, we can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership.
Okay, now I think I'm getting what you're going at here. We need to spend money to make money, so we're talking some big gains here. Big gains.
No, definitely no. I don't need any of your money. Just all we need to make a podcast right in one place.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that you're gonna need a pretty big check from me for this podcast. So do I just make it out to cash? Because it's no problem for me. I'll just write it up right now.
No. Listen, Dean, just head over to anchor.fm and check it out. You'll see why Anchor is the best place for us to record, edit, and distribute our podcasts. And I definitely do not need any of your money.
Shut up and take my money. And we're back from our short little break and our accidental recording of half our episode, but somebody done messed up.
Well,
Ain't that right?
new year, new challenges, but we're catching them in new ways.
Exactly. So yeah, for those on a little behind the scenes stuff, we just discussed Blood Simple, and then we went to discuss Raising Arizona, and we're gonna do it all again for you. So yeah, David, why don't you get us started? Raising Arizona. What'd you like about it? What'd you hate about it? What jumped out at you?
Well, I guess to start back from the beginning, Mr. Psychiatrist, from the beginning, it all started when I was born. I think the first thing we made note of was that there's a very, very funny movie, very different stylistically from Blood Simple, which was a statement by them. But also mixes a very interesting mix of like sophisticated comedy with slapstick comedy with cartoonish things with there's a bunch of different elements in here. And I guess we want to start the conversation off again in a new way. I'd like to really focus in on kind of going through the different characters, like the multitude of different kind of wacky characters they have. Because we have our two main characters who, Ed is kind of like normal. She's a pretty fairly normal character. She's a cop, and then that's about it. There's nothing really quirky about her, other
She's a
than
cop. She wants a baby, and
yeah.
she's in love with Hai, who is a multiple convicted criminal.
And honestly looks like the physical manifestation of a coke binge, but
That's just Nicolas Cage, man. You ever seen Snake Eyes? Come on.
true. But then you got these like greaser characters from John Goodman and William Forsythe, that being the Snotes brothers. 1987 didn't peg me as a time when greasers were still going to be around. Maybe rockabilly is kind of really what they're more like, but they seem more like the 1950s, like kind of chain gang greasers,
Hey, man, you know, the greaser haircuts never die. Apparently, that's all I got from that movie.
Yeah, and so, but that's another way that this movie kind of, I don't. It's kind of interesting because the Coens have this a tendency of, they'll include characters less for meaning sometimes and more for obstacle, and like just because they thought of them. Because I don't think anybody would think to include these characters in this movie, right? There's not really a reason story-wise you could think to have them there, but then all of a sudden, like they become a significant part of the obstacles of the story.
I almost feel like that's one of the things that makes the Coen brothers unique.
Yeah,
Is their grasp on characters, on their grasp on these more or less simple stories and how to complicate them enough to make them more unique, more interesting, so on and so forth. Like that's the whole thing with Blood Simple. As we said before, very simple story, and they just use their cinematic lens to just complicate that story enough to make it unique and make it interesting. And that's what Raising Arizona is.
yeah,
It's the story of two people fall in love, find out they can't have a kid, and the lengths they'll go to get a child, which is kidnapping, criminal stuff. There's a bounty hunter in there, and the wacky people around them. It's very interesting.
yeah.
The way the characters develop in this, and I don't know if they're not necessary. They're just really different than how most people would traditionally approach it.
Yeah, because I guess not necessary is probably a little bit too harsh on the character's role in the story because they do have a role. I mean, they're his old buddies from his old life, and it's supposed to physically manifest, and like he has to choose between continuing to be this like cracked out thief or a father. So yeah, I guess in theory they do have a role, but it's just so I find it so interesting that then they're made to be like this brothers duo who again are manifested in such a weird specific way. And maybe I guess in theory the way I could think about it is maybe maybe they're made a pair because it kind of outnumbers Ed at that point. Or if it was just one friend, it's like you have to choose between one person or the other. But now you have these two people on the one side that you want to be a part of the crime life, and they're more convincing than your one person, which is the wife. So maybe there is strength in numbers, but
Then I was wondering if they were trying to go for a Laurel and Hardy dynamic with the two of them.
that would make sense too. Yeah,
But, because
comedy
I
is
feel
always
like,
better than twos. Yeah,
yeah, it's also a thing where the Coen brothers, I feel, draw a lot from really old cinema, really old comedies. I mean, the King of Hail Caesar is basically a 1940s 50s big studio musical that they're drawing from that kind of stuff. Blood Simple is basically old noir films that they're drawing from. Uh, this is like really this is them drawing from all the old comedies they probably watched growing up. I mean, there's a little bit of Three Stooges in here. There's a little bit of like that fast talking wise cracking like 1930s like Frank Capra kind of comedies in there.
yeah,
It's really this movie is a really big mishmash of hey, this is some stuff the Coen brothers really thought were funny.
yeah. Or
But
the, of all else too, that they know works to make people laugh.
yeah,
Because I think a lot of contemporary comedies kind of suffer from this, from like they kind of only know what makes people laugh based on movies that have recently come out. So they try to do the same thing that those movies have done, and then it just kind of falls flat because it's like not that funny anymore, or it's just like the context is gone for why it's funny. Um, so maybe maybe some comedians could learn from the same thing, and that going just back to the masters, or not even
back to the roots.
yeah, the roots is more really what it is, because I don't think well, Buster Keaton again. And if you walk into any film history class, they're going to be like, "You'll remember this guy's name forever because he was way better than anybody else you know today," or at least that's how our teacher always put it.
You know,
But I think there is something to the fact that they figured out all this stuff first, so that they know it kind of in the most simple way.
it's one of those things where modern comedies I feel suffer from the post SNL boom of the 70s, 80s, and I guess into the 90s kind of thing, where it was comedy became a lot more referential, kind of pokey in the side humor kind of thing, a lot more character junk, whereas this feels a lot more like classical as to what it's pulling from. And I don't know, I again, I'm just being pretentious at this point, you know. Can't
No,
we just get comedies like they used to be, you know, back when they were funny?
a lot
I
of
still
things
think
should be
Three
the way they used to
Stooges.
be.
I still think Three Stooges is still hilarious. I think Three Stooges still plays today, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, it's just primal the way that kind of comedy is done. But the other character I do want to talk about extensively here is our friend Randall Craig Cobb, also known as Leonard
Smalls,
Smalls. Yeah, for some reason I was
Mr.
about to say Smokes, but
former
um,
heavyweight boxer Tex Cobb, that guy.
yeah, what a fascinating character, because I can't remember specifically if it was this movie that they brought inspiration from it, because I know they said it in one of the videos I researched. But they said it was either this or some other movie. They watched a lot of The Road Warrior before
hmm
and drew a lot of inspiration from it.
I
But this,
could see them watching a lot of Road Warrior and then watching this movie because Tex Cobb, I think he's wearing Mel Gibson's like costume from the Road Warrior.
yeah, he looks like he should be in that movie. I mean, down to like the fact that he kind of 1987 is kind of on like the cusp between like classic cinema and then like modern cinema, right? When you think of like older, kind of more analog looking movies that like are from the 70s, for example, that are much more soundstagey. They have like that crinkle to them in the audio. Uh,
It's I think I know what you're getting at. It's one of those things where we had the 70s new Hollywood, and then in the 90s we had that kind of like postmodern Kevin Smith, Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, Wes Anderson, like postmodern 90s
yeah,
boom of
kind of
new Hollywood or
when
of
films started to get more of
yeah.
a polish on them. You know what I mean?
I guess what you mean. Like when movies started becoming digital like later, but I think I know. Are you meaning the stylistic thing or the technique thing?
You noticed a lot less that they were a movie. I don't know. There's some sort of quality to films, certainly before the year 2000, but like more noticeable certainly before 1990, where you could tell that they're on a sound stage and a set, that the sets are fake, that the sound is like not fully optimized because they hadn't fully figured out how to perfectly do acoustics yet. Um,
Oh, okay. I get what you mean. It's the productions of films pre 1990 is a whole different ball game than films productions in post 1990 kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. In like this character, Leonard Smalls, feels like the kind of character that belongs in a 1970s movie. He looks like a character that belongs in a 1970s movie. But then everything else in this movie is like a little bit more modern after that, because especially the main one of the main locations of the movie is the double wide that
Hi Ed live in.
yeah, that high and Ed live in, and like that is more of a modern technique, as I'll put it, where it's like you're shooting on location on a set that is real, quote unquote. It's a real trailer, whether or not it's in Arizona, whatever, but it's in the desert somewhere.
Yeah, well,
And
I mean, at least the exteriors are there. The interiors are probably on a soundstage somewhere, to be honest.
yeah, whereas
Or
like this
maybe
Leonard
not even that,
Smalls,
like in a warehouse.
yeah, Leonard Smalls, it's just like so weird to me how like the sweatiness and the facial hair and like the look on his face, all are just like I feel like this should be on an older camera whenever I'm looking at him. It's such a
Every
weird
time you
quality
look
to
at
me.
him, you're like, every time you look at Leonard Smalls, you're like, this guy needs to be in like 30, like really grainy, like 16 millimeter, like Technicolor. This guy needs to look like
Yeah,
he's one of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
for real.
Which,
That's honestly how it does
he
feel.
kind of it is kind of interesting that you bring that up because out of all the characters in the movie, he is the most alien to the world, right? Everybody else is kind of like, bright, slapsticky goofball, and then you have this living pit bull come to, hunt down High.
Yeah,
And I think that's another point. It's the force of nature character, which the Coen brothers go back to kind of often. Where, well,
yeah.
at least I can name a couple of movies they go back to. I don't know if it's all their movies because
It's a
you know
frequent. I think it's like this character is sort of like the personification of the general theme they use in all their movies, with that being nature. They tend to use nature in almost all their movies, but then like they did sometimes they like to define it into one character specifically.
well, I mean, if we're going with like the themes that they repeat, because I think we can agree the Coen brothers, even if they don't like the moniker, are auteurs.
Yeah,
Like their films are very unique to them, and there's certain things that repeat in their oeuvre, and that is the character of the unstoppable force. You
yeah,
have the detective from Blood Simple, who for the most part is an unstoppable force. He is after these people, and he seems kind of unstoppable until the end. We have Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. We have the the lawmen from Oh Brother Where Art Thou. We even have John Goodman's character in Barton Fink. When he finally snaps, he is unstoppable.
yeah,
There's a lot of very interesting things that repeat in their movies over and over again that I think the groundwork is laid between Blood Simple and Raising Arizona. Like, these are really good jumping off points for the rest of their career.
Yeah. And it's interesting too because like in other movies, the force of nature character is particularly, how would you put it? It's kind of more underlying, and the character is much more valid to be in the story. Leonard Smalls really is like just out of nowhere kind of character. Like it almost
He's
it's like
hired to track down their kid. Come
yeah,
on.
but it's like he's much more unreal in this because he's like shooting rabbits on the road, leaving grenades behind and watching them explode in the distance. It and then rolls through every town like a bat out of hell. It's such a weird juxtaposition for the worlds because everything else is like so normal ish, and then all of a sudden it's just like Leonard Smalls is like a Batman villain.
The thing is with him is he is so different from everyone else in the film. And I think that's the point that the Coens are doing here. It's up to this point, you have an understanding of everybody in the story. You know exactly how they're going to act. They're going to act like living cartoons. And then you have Leonard Smalls who comes in and you're like, oh, this guy is so alien to what's going on. He's dangerous. He's weird. He's after high, and it builds up tension.
Yeah,
Builds up suspense. When are they going to finally meet? Who's going to come out on top? I don't know. It's very interesting. The whole, I think all the characters in this movie serve a purpose, even if that purpose is just for just for the Coens to play around with them.
yeah,
I think it's cool.
certainly, yeah. Um, yeah, I guess a lot of the other characters generally are less remarkable. Obviously, there's still Nathan Arizona himself, who we have the baby stolen from. His wife is is a little particular.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about characters, like, we got to go with one of the greatest characters of all time, and that's Nicolas Cage. And I'm not talking about High. I'm talking about Nicolas Cage. The
Right.
guy who will give 110% no matter what role he's in. Nicolas Cage. Because this is the movie that basically broke Nicolas Cage out as big starring leading man. Because after this, he was in Moonstruck, Vampire's Kiss, so on and so forth. He became a big star after this movie.
Yeah,
And, deservedly so, I'd say.
certainly deservedly so because it's interesting because like a lot of and unfortunately kind of Color Out of Space kind of did this for me. I feel like Nicolas Cage and a lot of other movies he's in doesn't make me garner sympathy for him as a character.
Mm-hmm.
There's the obvious example of National Treasure, which aside from him being like a guy who's out to steal the Declaration of Independence, it's like, okay, the character himself could be anybody, I guess.
Well, it is interesting. I think Nicolas Cage I think is a good actor. I know people
Yeah,
give him shit a lot of times. He's a good actor. He just picks bad movies. That's what I've basically gleaned from his career.
yeah. Um, but in this movie in particular, it's like, God, if he doesn't do a whole lot to get me to care about this character, because and I think that's also to do with the writing, but he himself plays it so well. He plays a lot of the innocent sides of this character very well, because there's obviously the side of him that's a bank robber, or not a bank robber, a corner store robber. He doesn't do banks.
For God's sakes, he robs convenience stores.
Yeah, but he has a heart inside of him that you really can get a hold of from the get go. Especially there's a specific shot when what's their name, the Snows brothers, when they come to his door, and they're all laughing together because they're reuniting in his living room, and the camera kind of peeks around the dark corner looking at them. It's interesting because, again, that's POV of Ed's character, who's like peeking around the corner, like seeing what ominous force is coming into their lives. But I I also loved like just the boyish kind of movements he has when wrestling around with those guys.
Yeah, he seems like a guy who feels generally normal or like more realistic than a
Yeah.
lot of other writers probably would have gone for. Because he seems like just like a normal like dude. I mean, granted the Coens would later go on to write The Dude, but this
Yeah.
guy is a dude. He's just lives in this small deserty town, has kind of a rough past, but just trying to go on the straight and narrow, but he's still kind of goofy. And he's generally charming. It's good character work. I'll go back to it every time. The Coens know how to write good characters.
Yeah, certainly.
But yeah, is there any other big points you wanted to shoot on this movie before we start our wrap up?
I don't think anything other than let's see. No, I mean, let's dig into the wrap up because I think that's where I might find a few final points about this movie.
No worries. Well, everybody, here's the little wrap up part we generally try to do here at the double feature, where we just see if these two movies work together, what's the best way to watch them, what were the good points about it, and what did we really pull from this double feature. So, David, first things first, did these work as a double feature? Did they work together?
Absolutely, yeah. I think so. Because I think it's exactly what we had outlined in the beginning is like, well, it's not necessarily something you would just watch going in blind. I think you need a little bit of a
An
a
opening
knowledge
salvo.
about
Yeah.
who the Coen brothers are. On top of the fact that you need a knowledge about them because that's really the only way you're going to care about a director's first two movies. But these two movies paired together without context, yeah, they're probably not going to work a whole lot. Mostly because Blood Simple will be the one that you kind of are like, why is this a part of this? Raising Arizona, I feel like anybody can get into because it's comedy. Comedies are easy for a lot of people to understand, and it's a fairly funny one at that. Blood Simple is a very dark movie, so it's like I can see how a lot of people might be turned off by it. But I think if you're a fan of the Coen, certainly this is one of the prime double features on their list.
Oh yeah, this if you were going to watch a Coen Brothers double feature, I would probably direct you to this.
Yeah.
Simply because these are the two extremes of the Coen Brothers. Like you can watch some of their later work where it's a lot more polished, a lot more interesting, or a lot more clean. But these, two directorial for directorial debuts 1 and 2, this is really good. And I think it goes to show that these guys have a bunch of range. Granted, that is the flaw of this double feature, which I think is going to be the issue for the whole month because we're doing Directors Month this January,
Right.
where you kind of need an opening dialogue with the Coens to really get into it. I think if you were interested in watching the Coen brothers and you hadn't really dug into their back catalog, this would be a great place to start. Because it shows you where they are on this end of the spectrum, on that end of the spectrum, and everything you watch after that just falls somewhere in between.
Right. I believe it. I think that's a very fair assessment of this. And, aside from that, I think if we were ever to do a Coen Brothers again, it would have to be something much more, their heavy hitter films.
Mm-hmm. I mean, their heaviest hitter would have to be, No Country for Old Men?
Yeah, then paired with probably, like, Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
Probably their other one that people would go to next.
I'd also like throwing in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? It's a very good film. A Barton Fink is also fantastic.
Yeah, that's true.
These guys have a lot of just knock 'em out of the park movies.
Yeah, even their lesser known ones, like the Hudsucker Proxy is great, and A Serious Man.
Hudster Proxy?
The Hudsucker Proxy.
Oh, it is the Hudsucker Proxy. Okay, sorry, I can't read. I have their list up on my other screen, and I just can't read.
Okay.
Might be.
Well, that's some new information we found in the new year. Dean can't read. That's why he watches so many movies.
Exactly.
Just not the ones with subtitles.
No. I just learned the language. It's way easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, but there's also The Man Who Wasn't There. They have a lot of movies in their back catalog that are really worth watching.
Yeah, certainly. So I don't know. We'll have to dig through more of their films in the future. I would certainly enjoy it. I'm going to after all this. I'm going to find every Coen film I can get my hands on. As I was saying to Dean, I'm going to do that as strictly as even getting a copy of Bad Santa, because apparently they had a hand in writing that.
Billy Bob Thornton was like, "Hey, can you guys make a run at this so I don't just make a fool of myself?"
Yeah, and well, no, even like the original idea for Bad Santa, they had the original idea. They were like, we want to make the movie. We just want to make a movie about like a really awful drunk Santa Claus that has to be toted around by a little person. And then Bad Santa was born.
I don't know how to take that. My life is a lion. My day is ruined.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't know.
cool.
I mean,
More you know. But yeah, so I guess that also kind of is rounding us out here. What other big things we gotta throw on? Because we went through, how to watch like the movies. Do they work? The directors. Why you should watch these. I guess the order in which you watch them, which I think we agreed upon way earlier. It's Blood Simple to Raising Arizona. It just works better.
yeah.
Other than that, I think that's about all I got. Unless there's any points you want to make about the movies or the directors before we do our sign off.
No, I think again, two good films. Go watch them. Go watch other Coen Brothers movies because you'll love it. Go watch Fargo. Maybe stay away from movies that they are associated with, but people tried to make like them anyways, like Suburbicon. I haven't seen it myself, but people say that people can't do the Coens like the Coen Brothers do.
I've heard that too.
Yeah, so Viva Coen, very good.
All right. Well, that wraps us up here at the Double Feature podcast. David, what can people expect from us coming up?
Well, coming up, like we said, the rest of the month is Directors Month. Our next episode, we're going to be covering two of Dean's favorites from a little director. You know, you may have heard of him. His name's Stanley.
He might have come up one or two times.
Yeah, it's a Kubrick, right?
Stanley Kubrick, something like that. I don't know. We're gonna be watching Paths of Glory and Full Metal Jacket though, so
yeah. So get your bootstraps up. You're really gonna be in for a heavy week.
It's gonna be good, boys.
Yeah,
ooh, buddy.
But yeah, that's gonna be a good one, and then you'll be excited to see what other movies we have going out at you Directors Month as well soon. In order to do that, Dean, where can they find us so that they can keep in touch?
If they wanted to keep in touch with us, they can always go to our Instagram page. That is _podcast. It's a little light right now, but we're gonna get working on it. But if you want more up-to-date stuff, you can always check out our YouTube channel, and that is In the Frame on YouTube, where you can find our podcast Double Feature as well as Too Obscure for TV, and hopefully some more content coming up soon.
Very good.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. You gotta sound a little bit more excited when you're trying to sell people a thing. Come on now.
Yeah, it's a new year, Dean. We're all about new, exciting things in the Double Feature this year, and I'm looking forward to it.
As am I. All right. For everybody out there in movie land, you have a good time. Peace.
See you, Dean.
See ya.